Hi there, I'm Amy.
And I'm Sue.
And we're the mother-daughter duo behind Chatter Matters.
Each week, we're going to be chatting through everyday challenges and how we navigate them as two women from different generations.
So get yourself comfy, grab your cup of tea or coffee, and let us show you why Chatter Matters. Welcome back to another episode of Chatter Matters.
Welcome.
Oh, it's nice. I'm back home. I'm visiting Mum. It's quite nice to be back in our normal space rather than sort of awkwardly set up in my empty office room.
It feels different. It's nice to have you back.
Oh, thanks. We've seen each other quite a lot recently, haven't we?
We have. Well, I was away, so...
Oh, yeah. I don't know. It feels like I've been back.
You've been here
I've been here quite a lot, which makes me feel like I've seen you a lot.
Yeah. Well, because my last week, as I said on the last episode, I was off to South Africa for a week.
Off to South Africa? How was it? How was your last week?
It was lovely, actually. So I was in Durban, which I haven't been to before. But it was really... Is
Durban north? It's testing my knowledge of South Africa's geography.
No.
It's near Johannesburg, isn't it?
Yes. It's about an hour's flight from
So that's north
Joburg.
of North South Africa.
Yeah, it's not Cape Town.
Yes.
It's up further than that.
The one place that we know.
Well, no, I know Joburg as well. But no, it's my first time in Durban, which was very lovely. It was on the coast, staying in a very lovely hotel with some gorgeous people. And I love the South African feel and vibe, and it's my favourite place to go. So I'm very, very happy there. So I was working, so it was good work, good vibes. I was very happy.
Good.
And so, yes, you stayed here, which is probably why you feel like we've seen a lot of each other.
Yes, absolutely. No, because I was back here. I was dog sitting, house sitting, bathroom renovation sitting.
Yes.
Which is very exciting because you do have a complete new bathroom now.
I do. And I've had a bath, you've had a bath. So
I know.
oh
my God, it's amazing. It's been like 4 years since I've had a bath in a house. Like, that's madness.
Yeah. I'm very happy with the work. So how was your week? Because you had a very stressful week, didn't you, while I was away?
Yeah, it was a lot at work. There's just a lot going on, and the project that I'm working on had a big deadline. Well, it had 2 big deadlines that I was kind of holding. And it was just my luck that they happened to fall on the same week. So it was a very stressful week last week, but we got out the other side and they went very well. Got some really lovely feedback from people. And
you did well in terms of managing. One of the conversations we had while I was away was that you said you felt like you were doing well in terms of getting enough sleep, managing your state.
I basically gave myself the challenge of just rejuvenating every evening. Yeah. I think because I was staying here and I was dog sitting, I hadn't made any social plans. So I basically took it as a challenge of knowing that during the day, because I was working relatively long hours last week as well. So I was making sure that at least I was logging off by 6:30 p.m. so that I could take the dog out for a walk before the sun set. I made sure that I was eating good food and that I was reading a lot and going to sleep early. And so it was a unexciting week from a work, like life outside of work perspective, but I knew that last week was really important, and therefore it was important to me that I didn't make it any harder on myself. So I kind of set myself a bit of a challenge, and I think I did a very good job of it.
Good lessons learned, hey?
Absolutely. And then Marty and I headed out to the pub on Friday night in the sun, Aperol spritz. He was great. He was loving it. He was having a great time.
Good. I'm glad you had a good week. So we thought this week we would talk a little bit about adolescence. Yeah. Because it's obviously very topical at the moment.
Very topical. I feel like it's been all over my social media for the past 2-3 weeks.
And given that our podcast is about how to have conversation across generations, we thought it was a brilliant depiction of the importance of that. So we thought we might dive into that a little bit. And also we got a question from one of our listeners, which was a really beautiful question, which is actually they want to be able to talk openly with their parents, but don't feel like they have the relationship to be able to do that. So their question was, how have you and I created our relationship so that we're able to be as honest and open as we are. So we thought we'd also share that. But before we dive in, for those that, I don't know, might be living on Mars that have not heard about adolescence, do you want to give just a few headlines on what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do like my Amy's 60-second recap of what is adolescence. So adolescence is a 4-part drama in Netflix. If you've not watched it, I'm going to give you some spoilers right here, right now. But it follows the fallout of a 13-year-old boy who ends up murdering a young girl from his school. It turns out he's part of, he's sort of caught up in this incel culture movement, and it sort of follows the sort of his arrest and his interview with the police. It follows the police trying to find out why he's done it. So they visit the school and they talk to the kids there, and they look at the education system in which this kid, Jamie, was a part of. It looks at the impact on the family, particularly on his dad, which is incredibly powerful. And it also, there's one episode, which I think both you and I was a highlight for both of us, that looks at a child psychiatrist who comes to visit Jamie sort of 7 months after the fact to sort of get a read on him and what's actually going on under the surface for him. Absolutely incredible form of art. Each episode done in one complete shot take, which I think is also what's generated a lot of this conversation. But tackles a really tricky, nuanced part of society that is very, very, very topical, with Andrew Tate and with Trump and with all of this shenaniganery going on in the world. In a way that was super immersive and super impactful to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely loved it. I think it's probably the best bit of TV I've seen in a long while, and I found it pulling on my emotions in multiple directions, and I felt like it had layers and layers of depth to it.
It was so, and I think that was one of the things that I loved was it I think it's one of the most nuanced pieces of television I've watched in a very long time as well. Like, there was no spoon feeding there. It was very intricate, and there were so many moments where things were being conveyed in the movement of an eye twitch, and just phenomenal acting and direction. And
I guess in the space of hour, why we thought it interesting to talk about was that you do plot the relationship between father and son, mother and daughter, parenting. It kind of, from chatting matters. It showed
it
when
almost shows the like catastrophic the potential catastrophic consequences of not having open dialogue and conversations
and a safe space, creating a safe space. So I guess in terms of answering the question, when we had the question is how have you and I built, I'll talk from my end and then you talk from your end. So I think initially as a parent, I very consciously, when you were little, would talk a lot about feelings. So I introduced books that talked about I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry. So I consciously was trying to give you a vocabulary that you would be able to express yourself, and that it was safe to express yourself with feelings. And I know you and your brother often go, use your words, because
that was like my mantra of my childhood was use your words.
Because if you were feeling something, I was trying to give you a vocabulary that you would be able to articulate what you were feeling without acting out. And of course you can express your feelings too. That was also a safe space. So I think that was a very deliberate choice I made when I was parenting you when you were very little and we were introducing books.
And it's so interesting as well because I don't remember that, but you absolutely did it because I have such a well-rounded vocabulary for emotions. And I remember me being shown the emotions wheel as part of my psychology degree and you being like, yeah, I used to show you that as a kid, and it had really intricate emotions like distraught and victimized and really lovely juicy emotion words. And I had no memory of being introduced to that concept as a child, but makes so much sense to me now as an adult because I am able to pinpoint feelings with a pretty high degree of accuracy now, and to be able to use these nice, big, juicy, specific words beyond just "I feel bad."
Yeah, and it was a you know, safe space at bedtime when you're cuddling up, reading a book together. You know, so I think that was a very conscious effort on my side. I think the other thing that I've always tried to do is to adapt my parenting style as you have grown up.
Yes.
So I've always felt like I needed to learn and I needed to meet you with where you were at, rather than expecting you to keep responding to my parenting style. So again, if you play that through with the two characters, you know, the father and the son, you know, they just, their separation just grew, you know, as Jamie got older. The father didn't know how to connect with him anymore, you know, and that separation grew. So I think I've been very intentional about me working hard, you know, not just parenting in one way and then you have to fit in with my parenting, but actually me constantly learning about how do I need to parent now. And
also us as individuals, because I would say you didn't parent me or my brother in the same way either, because we needed different styles.
So yes, and it's quite a conscious thing, I think, parenting, you know, and I did educate myself. I read books. I remember reading a book about raising boys, you know, because it was very different from you, and boys needed a different style, a different way of.
Curious, like, you know, at the time, what was kind of the, you know, given adolescence really looks at that, the pressures that young boys are facing and the impact that can have on them, you know, because in the TV show, Jamie effectively gets bullied for sort of not getting girls and not getting any attention from them, and that it sort of develops into this sort of sinister power thing for him of trying to sort of pick on girls when they're weak. But it feels like there are very different pressures on young boys now. I guess when you were sort of in the realm of raising my brother, what were some of the things that you were looking at raising a young man?
Well, I guess a part of it was just being able to express himself and actually talk about it. I mean, you wear your heart on your sleeve, and you'd come back from school and you'd tell me everything.
Oh, you wouldn't be able to shut me up.
You know, whereas your brother would like, yeah, it was okay, it was all right, it was good. You know,
it was a bit of a running joke, wasn't it? Of like, we'd get in the car and be like, "Oh, how was school?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, it's fine." And I'd be like, blah, 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 blah.
Which I think is I think it's quite typical.
We're pretty stereotypical of
that, you know, boys and girls. So I think again, my patience with your brother to continually invite him into the conversation. And create a safe space for him to do it. And I do, you know, there was one seminal moment where, you know, he wasn't able to express his anger, you know, when he was going through teenage years, and, you know, he would get triggered and he wasn't able to express himself. And I would be very patient. And then I remember one day where I was like, no, you don't run away. We sit and have a conversation around this. So there was quite a lot of intention around, we have to be able to dialogue even when things are difficult, even when you're struggling at school, you know, but whereas I felt in adolescence, you know, Jamie was bottling all of that up. He wasn't talking to his mum or his dad about,
or his friends. It sounded like, you know, like even his friends were kind of guessing as to why it happened. Yeah.
So I do think it's incredibly difficult. I mean, I can talk about how I did it then, but I certainly looked at that program and thinking there are so many layers for parenting now because of technology, because of the change. You know, I'm not sure that what I did would have been enough. You know, I think there are, you know, I do remember when your brother started gaming, you know, and it was a conversation around how many hours do we allow him to do that, and a little bit of justification of he's learning to multitask and his reflexes are really good, and you know, that kind of, which is also true.
Which
you know,
is true.
given the
Yeah.
career that he's now in, there is a lot to be said for it. But you know, how much of that was also an easy excuse not to challenge him on how many hours he was spending gaming. But overlay that with social media pressure now, which you know, you and he didn't have as much as what you have now.
Yeah, definitely not. I think almost before we, because there's so much to talk about from the social media lens and the difference that adolescence depicts versus even what it was like for me growing up. You know, and we're talking about like, you know, less than 10, you know, well, around 10 years ago. Oh my God, that makes me feel old. like, a decade ago was when I was a child. That makes me feel old.
But what was it, what are your memories then? Because those are my memories of how I created the relationship. What were from your side, what was it that we did to create the relationship that we have now?
So if I think to when I was little, I obviously your memories then are more feelings than they are memories per se. I mean, I think we've always been very attached. I think you and I have always just been very, very close. And for me, it always felt almost naturally like we were like that. And I think there's an element of that, of like you and I just are our soul. We are very kindred souls. But I think also to your point of like in the early years, you weren't working for the first 2 years of my life. So we spent a huge amount of time together.
Well, we were living in a foreign country.
We were.
Literally, we had just each other.
Yes. You and me against the world. Not that I've got one memory of one staircase, I think, and that's about it. But as I get older, I think the big standout thing for me was like you were always there if I needed you, whether that was there in person, whether it was on the end of the phone, like I knew I could count on you. And I think that was my... And I was okay with counting on you as well. I think that's the other thing, which is I have always felt very, very comfortable talking about what's on my mind and thinking things through. I think part of that is me. I am an extroverted thinker. I work through things by speaking them aloud to someone else. And I think I've developed that as a coping mechanism in a sense. I think because I was safe enough as a kid to be able to do that in a way where I was never made to feel wrong. I was just encouraged to think things through and sort of play around with the situation verbally in my own mind and get it out of my brain. So I think it's always just felt really open with you. I've always felt very safe. And I wouldn't be able to tell you what you did to make it feel that way. And to be honest, probably a lot of that groundwork is done from stuff that I can't remember. Yeah. It's stuff that when you're 2, 3, 4 years old of, like, I mean, I remember when I was at university, we were sat having dinner or lunch or something like that. And we were watching a dad and a little baby both facing a mirror.
I remember that. Yeah, so cute.
And doing the emotion faces. And he was smiling and she'd be like happy and he'd like frown and she'd be like angry and you'd be like, oh, I used to do that with you. Yeah. And I've got no memory of that, but it will be those little foundation blocks that will have given me language, given it feel safe to express those different things. I think...
I was just thinking one other deliberate thing I did was as you got older, there were always phases, like as a child, you're around all the time. And it's how do you create a safe space to be there? As you went to school, it would normally be when you were coming back from school, making sure that there was space that you could download and talk about whatever went on at school and encourage you to talk about your day. And be curious and it
always comes back to curiosity, doesn't it?
Like sitting around the kitchen table with a drink and a piece of toast and let's chat about your day, sort of that habit. But I do remember when you became teenagers, I always used to know that when I went to bed, normally if one of you needed to talk to me, you would then come in at that point in time. So it might be 10 o'clock in the evening. Yeah. All of a sudden, one of you would pop in and sit down on the bed and actually you're then ready to talk about whatever was on your mind. So that was me flexing my parenting style to, I wasn't going to bed at 9, lights out, don't open my door, don't come in. Yeah. It was like the bedroom was okay for you to come into and it was almost a safe space. Yeah. I mean, I know a lot.
I still use it as a safe space now. Like, I will get back from netball training. It is 10 o'clock at night. Mum is bleary-eyed looking at me, and I'm like, oh, you'll never guess what's happened today.
So I think from consciously, it's like being there. You said you could count on me. And I think that was part of me, you know, that I would be very conscious about, okay, late at night as teenagers is the time that if you're going to speak, that'll be when you speak. So I just need to make sure that I'm ready and willing to have those conversations then.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because like it didn't even cross my mind that was something that would have gone through your head.
Yeah.
It's just, again, like for me as a child, it's like, I feel safe enough that I can go and like pew, because your door was never shut. Actually,
no, it was. Yeah, it would be open. Yeah,
it's fascinating, isn't it? Your bedroom door was never shut.
No.
Huh. Well, we learn something new, folks, every day. But I think so then the only other thing that I was going to say was around your point around almost your parenting grew up with us.
Yes.
Because I remember you and I talk about, we've had some pretty, and normally they're fiery disagreements.
Yeah.
But they were like watershed moments for our relationship. And, you know, like one of them we always talk about, like, I have two key ones. One which I remember, one which I don't, and I've had told to me. I think one key one which you'll be able to speak to more is when I'd done something wrong. I still don't know. You tell me every time what I did wrong. I did something wrong. Maybe I drew on something.
Yeah, you drew. You got some crayons with your cousins.
To be clear, I was like 6 years old.
Yeah,
like,
you were young. You were young, and we were staying in a big family thing, and with your cousins, you were messing around, and we were in a rented house. And you had got crayons and you were drawing all over the duvet in the rented property.
Not very sensible for young Amy. But and again, like I've got no memory of this, but you didn't let me leave that room until I'd apologised to Granny for getting presumably
we were there hours.
Everywhere.
We were there hours.
Yeah.
It was one of those moments where it was an Easter weekend and I had time, and you'd not been very good at saying sorry for quite a while. And I
don't know what it is. I think it's like if I said sorry, then I'd have done something wrong.
Yes.
I think that's probably mentally where I went, because I was a good kid.
Yeah.
I'm still a good kid. I'm such goody two shoes. I hate breaking rules. Like genuinely nothing. I feel sick thinking about breaking a rule. Like I'm not cool in the slightest. But I think probably there's something for me around if I say sorry, then I'm admitting I've done something wrong.
Yeah. Well, I had decided, because, you know, as a working mum, I hadn't got time to really hold you in that space. But we were on holiday and I was like, okay, today is the day.
Here we go, lads.
We are going to crack this. You need to say sorry for something. And I think we probably were there for 4 hours. You were pretty stubborn.
I am stubborn.
You were pretty stubborn about that, and
That's a past tense thing. I'm still stubborn.
but that was one of those. It was a watershed moment of like, no, you will learn to say sorry, because it's really important to be able to apologise.
But I think from a parenting perspective, it shifts a dynamic of like, okay, now we're on the other side. Can we talk about the fact that we've disagreed? And then the other big one for us was it would have been 15, 16.
Yeah, you were doing your GCSEs.
I was doing my GCSEs. I think it was my mocks.
Yeah.
And I've actually forgotten what we were disagreeing about.
I was getting upset with you that you weren't revising.
That was it. Again, to put into context, I'm such a nerd. Like, I'm such a swot. Like, I'm a teacher's pet. I try really hard at academics most of the time. So I think, and actually it's so funny because we're almost verging back on the disagreement. I'm remembering it now. I think I got really upset that it felt like you didn't trust me.
Exactly.
That was my thing, which was like, trust me to know myself and my knowledge of this subject stuff, and that I will get done what I need to get done. And if I need to stay up until 2 a.m. to do revising the day before, then that's my own fault and I can own the consequence. But it was the first time you had to leave the house for us disagreeing. And then I remember I had my like early 2000s music video moment of like you walking out of the kitchen. I was in the kitchen and I slid to the ground and I cried, and I had such a main character drama queen moment of like, she's left me. Oh my goodness. We've argued.
And my reason for leaving was because I was not managing my state at that point. I was furious with you. And I was like, I'm going to get really angry and I need to remove myself from this situation because that won't help. But it was an important... And again, I think because of our relationship, we'd created that kind of safety of you know, you that was the moment where you were saying no.
Yeah.
You were drawing a boundary. The first one I was
Yeah.
drawing a boundary. The second one you were
Yeah.
drawing a boundary, which is actually, no, you now need to start trusting me. And I am, you know,
and I can own my own mistakes. If this is a mistake,
Yeah.
then it's my fault.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with it being my fault.
Yeah. So you're right. Those were quite two seminal moments in terms of shifting our dynamic.
And I think the reason why I bring that up is that you can do all the things right. You can create the safe spaces, and we will still disagree.
Yeah.
You and I will continue to disagree on things.
But I think but you need to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's healthy to be able to do that and to get annoyed with each other and then make up afterwards and go, why was that annoying? Why did it upset me? Why was I angry?
Yeah.
Why did I get so triggered and have to walk out? Like, it's not that those things are inherently bad. It's that we are then able to discuss it afterwards once cooler heads prevail.
Yeah, and the relationship is able to be maintained.
Yeah.
It doesn't get broken. You know, I think that, again...
And it's done from a place of love, right?
Yeah.
Like...
And if I think about adolescence, again, back to that, there were so many moments where things went unsaid.
Yeah.
You know, the depth of connection just wasn't there, and therefore so much was unsaid. There was one moment, and I mean, I hadn't cried all the way through it, and there was a lot in there. But there was one moment at the very end where the daughter, you know, mum and dad were arguing and disagreeing, and you know, and she was worried about her dad, and you know, that kind of learnt pacifying behaviour of actually what does a woman do to help a man when they're struggling, you know. And she'd gone and got herself dressed up and said, well, you know, for my father, of course, I'm, you know, if there's a moment to dress up, it's now. And I burst into tears because I thought there was a young woman who was trying to gloss over a conversation that finally her parents were having. Yeah. But she came in to go, oh, no, that's like, it's too much, you know, so how do we gloss over it, and we'll go and get popcorn and we'll go and watch a film, you know, which for me was another skating over of the depth of conversation that was really needed at that point. But it's such a learnt behaviour by the daughter. So that was, at that moment, I was like, oh, they just need to be able to talk to each other.
Yeah. So I guess to round out the sort of answer, I guess, what would be your top tips of, you want to have a conversation with, like, either okay, so twofold. One, you're more in the grown-up era of your relationship, either with your parents or with your child. What would you say top tip for that? And then I'll come to my second one following up from that.
Persistence. Keep hanging in, keep asking, how are you? Let me tell you about my day. You know, be persistent and don't take the brush off. Yeah. And you know, there's a lot where I know people use a lot of humour rather than have the conversation that they need. Or there's banter in the house and they don't have the conversation that they need. So mine would be, if you want to have this kind of open relationship, then you have to work at it. You have to be persistent at it, and don't take a brush off as well, they don't want to do it. They probably just don't know how to, and you have to. And I think as a child, if you're trying to be able to have, if you're a grown child like you are, and you would like to have a better relationship with your parents, then sometimes you have to teach them. Yeah,
I was just going to say that would be my tip, which is don't be frustrated or resentful if you have to lead the way. Yeah. I think that would be for people who are my age, who are like me, or even if people, you know, people who are older, who have got, you know, like, you don't have to be in your 20s to want to have a different relationship with your parents. Don't be resentful of having to lead the way. Yeah,
you might need to role model it.
Yeah, and there's something, and like, I can do this as well, of like, there's frustration when it feels like, oh, why am I feeling like the mature one in this conversation? That's not right. But that's my inner child having a go. Yeah. Actually, the reason why I want to have these kinds of conversations is because the adult in me wants to have these conversations with them. So therefore, step into that adult energy. Yeah. And I'm talking transactional analysis of like parent, child, adult archetypes. I'm not saying adult as in like, don't be a kid. Yeah. But like, own that energy of, I would like to have this conversation, and model it, and you know, these kinds of things aren't built without any kind of vulnerability. And as you say, persistence is key, and I think forgiveness is key as well. Of like, I think we're having these kinds of conversations in an open way at a society level that I don't think has ever happened before. No. So there's an element of forgiveness and openness that we all need to enter into.
And vulnerability.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't find this easy.
Yeah.
I don't find it...
and I know we've never done this before.
Yeah, exactly. And I would like to be able to, but I'm not quite sure how we go about it. Can we talk about how we change our relationship? You know, there's some disclosure and some vulnerability that I think would also really help.
Yeah. Amazing. I love it. So that was option 1. And then top tip number 2 would be if you're a new parent.
Yeah.
And I guess this kind of starts to edge into what you were talking about the social media piece and about how it feels like so much has changed. But if you're a new parent, how would you, if you were to do it all over again?
Cool.
But with today's society.
That's difficult.
Yeah.
I think you'd probably be having a lot more boundary conversations. So the idea
That's hard.
Really hard, you know, like with an 11-year-old child having a boundary conversation, and then how do you manage boundaries? So almost the conversation you and I had when you're 13 or 14, you need to sort of have 11.
The one we talked about was 15, 16.
Yeah, 15, 16. You'd be needing to, you know, so there's something about how do you talk about what's okay, what's not okay? How do you give your child a voice to say, no, they want this, they don't want that? I think you'd be constantly in a boundaries. What are healthy boundaries? What are unhealthy boundaries?
That is freaking complex to be.
Yeah.
You know, because if I remember when I was, you know, like, but I remember I wasn't allowed on Instagram until I was 13 because that was the age that you had to be to have an Instagram. Yeah. And that was...
That was a boundary.
That was a boundary. Yeah. But it was, at the time, such a clear-cut one.
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays, you know, you've got, you know, even then, when, you know, if we've got any older folks on the call, you'll remember when Instagram looked like an actual brown camera before they had their fun pink rebrand. You know, but it was like, even then I felt the pressure of, if I wait until I'm 13, so many people, I'm not going to be cool, I'm not going to be interesting, I'm not going to be popular, I'm not going to be involved. Yeah. I can only imagine the pressure that is on our young people with regards to involvement in social media. Yeah. And so I guess that boundary piece, so much of it is you're almost going to have, I guess you almost have to have those more adult level conversations at a younger age. But it's so important because they're going to be exposed to adult content at a younger age as well.
Completely. I mean, that's the bit that's
it's horrifying, isn't it? It's really distressing.
It's very difficult. I think the other thing that I think as if I was parenting, because you are needing to have such adult conversations at a young age when they are still children. Yeah. How do you give them space to be children?
Oh God, yeah.
You know, like where they don't have to, I don't know, where there isn't responsible, where they're not having peer pressure, where they can just be stupid and silly and, you know.
What do you think that would look like?
I don't know, you know, for me it's being out in nature, you know, it's building tree houses, it's dens. You know, dens and just away from screens and giving permission to roll down hills and sledge and, you know, snowball fights and, you know, it's all that kind of stuff is like, maybe you just intentionally also need to make sure that your child can be a child.
Yeah. So it's the role of the parent is to, it becomes creating childish moments. Yeah. So that they don't have to have the weight of the adult world on them.
Well, again, if you look, you know, the way that Jamie was depicted, I mean, he was a solemn, serious child having massive doubts about the way he looked and
his self-worth
and you know,
I mean, for 13 years old, I mean, the thing that struck me in episode 3 was him effectively talking about the fact that there was nothing good about him. He wasn't good at anything and there was nothing good about him. My heart broke. And And I think that if there's any, for me, like if I, I'm watching it as someone who at some point would like to be a parent. I'd like to be a mother at some point in my life. And it felt like that for me was my one thing to take away, which was, if I do nothing else as a parent, it's to make sure that my child knows things that I think they're good at, and that I can help them internalize that. So, it's building of that self-worth and self-confidence. And it almost goes back to that boundary setting piece, but and the thing we were talking about earlier around, articulating emotions, but it's like, how do you articulate the things that are good about yourself? And they may not be tangible, because you may not be into sports, and it may not be that you're a good goalkeeper. The conversation we had a couple of weeks ago around women in sport, like that may not be your thing. But what is it that you're really kind, you're really generous? Is it that you make the people around you feel really loved and really special? Like, those are really important things to be able to articulate about yourself. And I guess I wonder, it's almost it's not to frame it as preventative, but in the context of adolescence, it is preventative. But it's almost, to such a chaotic world that puts so much pressure on our young people, how do we build up their armor to be able to exist in a world where, like, as parents, you're not going to be able to protect them from everything?
So I think definitely, some vocabulary, I think, is still the same, being able to articulate what they are struggling with, that they have a safe space, that they can talk about that kind of stuff and have got language to do that. But also, you are consciously working on self-worth, and it's okay to be you. You don't have to be anyone else. So I think parents helping their children find what's special about them or what's different about them, which they cherish and that they embrace, rather than, which is so difficult, because such a rite of passage for children, they just want to belong.
100%.
Like, so you don't want to stand out, you want to be in the tribe and be part of the in crowd.
I mean, because you always talk to us as kids around, like, the archetypes that we moved through, and I think that was always a really helpful frame for me going through my childhood, teenagehood, adulthood, and that whole piece of, it's okay that I just want to fit in, because that's where I'm meant to be right now, and that's what I'm meant to be feeling, because that's the stage of life that I'm in.
It's not easy. I don't envy people that are parenting, right now, but some of the fundamentals of safe space, a child feeling loved,
a child getting to be a child,
and that you, as much as possible, keep them secure and anchored. I always like roots and wings was always my...
That's cute. I don't know if I've heard you say that before.
Kind of give them deep roots around what are their values, what your moral compass, your what's right, what's wrong is your deep roots, and then wings to fly is like, what's your potential, what do you want to be, how do you just be the person that you want to be. So roots and wings.
Oh my god, I like that a lot. That's really cute. I love that. Well, that's a perfect ending, I think. Roots and wings. I love it. Well, maybe we've got our episode title now. But I think, as you say, it's so difficult, but that's exactly why talking about it is so important, because people who've been through being a parent like yourself, to share what worked for them and what didn't, for someone who has come through the experience of being a child and adult with social media, sharing a bit of that knowledge. It's just so important that we just keep the communication and like that sort of like society level knowledge sharing, getting a little HRy, but
it is discourse. How do we just have dialogue with each other? Because I wonder how many families, they sit and have their dinner in front of the TV, or they don't share about what their day is. They're not used to talking about what goes on in their day. So there are just some simple habits, I think, that you can build as a parent, that you just keep growing. But talking matters. We are social beings, and we need a way of making sense of the world through our conversations.
Absolutely. So on that note, I reckon we close that, because I think that I've loved that. That was a really, just even just being able to hear your, like, almost things about my own childhood that I hadn't realised is really fun. So that was very cool. I enjoyed that. And if anyone's got any further questions, I mean, clearly this is something both you and I are incredibly passionate about and could continue talking about this for a very long time. So do let us know if there's anything you want us to dive into in a little bit more depth.
Yeah, and thank you for the person that gave us the question, that helped
both
to
you and I had a massive smile on our face when that came through into our email, wasn't it?
It's such a great question. It's like we just assume that relationships are possible without really decoding.
Yeah. I mean, you and I were good on the phone for like a good hour brainstorming how we were gonna it was a lot of fun. But yeah, so if you do, you can find us on Instagram at chattermatterspod, and then you can also email us, which is chattermatterspod@outlook.com. So yeah,
we would love to hear more questions or more topics, or if this episode has sparked a sense of curiosity, then we'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. So, Mum, what's coming up on the week for you? What's on the agenda?
I'm catching up with a few friends this week, a few girlfriends. When I was saying that with you transitioning and moving out, that I needed to invest in my female friendships. So I've got 2 of those because I haven't got as busy a week this week, and so I'm catching up with 2 girlfriends this week and going for some nice walks. I'm looking forward to that.
Amazing. I love it.
And for you?
So I am continuing to work, obviously, but I have got one of my friends from work. She's coming over tomorrow evening to come and see my flat for the first time, which is very fun. Then I've got a night out with some friends for a friend's birthday on Friday night, which will be good fun. It's always good. It's a good group for a boogie and a little tipple. And then this week I've got my last netball game of the season.
Oh wow!
I've got my last netball game of the season, and then the plan is try and get my living room sorted. I've got roll-on filler. I've got
those of you who've been on our Instagram account, you would have seen Amy in her overalls.
Hell yeah, my DIY dungarees. Absolutely they are my superpower. But so it's going to be a bit of a weekend of probably recovering from a hangover on Saturday and then doing some DIY Saturday afternoon and into Sunday.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, take care everybody.
Have a lovely week.
And we will speak to you next week.
Fabulous. Bye everyone.
Bye.